Got Mr. Hooter and Toro with us again today. Oh, I slept in and my daughter was actually making some noise and it's like, oh, it's time to stream. Wondering if this is y'all waking me up. Because I almost slept in last week too, or I did sleep in last week too, and actually almost rolled over and was like, no, we're good. Don't need to do it this week. And ended up enjoying that one so much that I think it's him showing me, it's like, hey, there's joy in this if you do it. Like, oh, okay, yes, sir.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. Hoot, how was your week?
Good. Had some hiccups at the beginning, but got some stuff sorted, and yeah, been nothing but blessed ever since. So
Yeah, man, I'm getting some feedback in audio. You getting the same thing?
I am not. Um,
How's my audio? Can we get a 5x5 in the chat? All right, reconnected headphones. How's that? Is it better?
it's fine on my end.
Because I know we had this a couple weeks ago where, like, man, I was just getting a ton of feedback in my headphones.
Well, I haven't noticed a difference, but that's just me.
Okay.
So
We'll see what happens. All right, you want to start us off in Proverbs 9?
I can do that.
Awesome.
Let's see. Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn on its 7 columns. She has slaughtered her meat. She has mixed her wine. She has also prepared her table. She has sent her young women. She cries out to the highest places of the city. Who is simple? Let him turn in here. As for him who lacks heart, she says to him, come, eat of my bread and drink of the wine I have mixed. Leave the simple ones and live, and walk in the way of understanding. He who reproves a scoffer gets shame for himself. He who rebukes a wrong one gets himself a blemish. Do not reprove a scoffer lest he hate you. Reprove a wise one, and he loves you. Give instruction to a wise one, and he's wiser still. Teach a righteous one, and he increases in learning. The fear of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the set-apart one is understanding. For by me your days become many, and years of life are added to you. If you have become wise, you have become wise for yourself. And if you have scoffed, you alone bear it. A foolish woman is loud, simple, and without knowledge, for she has seated herself at the door of her house, on a seat by the highest places of the city, to call those who pass by, who go straight on their way. Who is simple? Let him turn in here. And as for him who lacks heart, she says to him, stolen waters are sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. But he does not know that the dead are there. Her guests are in the depths of Sheol.
Mm. So just starting at the beginning, I guess, of chapter 9, uh, the compare and contrast of where wisdom has built her house versus where the um, I guess the wicked woman has built her house, for lack of a better description. The wise wisdom, where she's built her house, it's on 7 columns, or has hewn out her 7 columns. Have you done any research into that at all?
No, I have not. I think I remember a tie-in somewhere in like a different proverb or something, but I don't remember.
So, um, this is speculation, um, but uh, a lot of the Jews consider the Book of Numbers to be 3 books, not one. Uh,
Oh, yes, that's right.
and I want to say, oh, but that would take the 5 books of the Torah to actually be 7 books. Yeah, so here it is. They consider Numbers 10, 35, and 36 to be its own section. Um, and I believe it has to do with a special rendering of a character in the Hebrew. So um, you have your jots and your tittles, um, and a jot is where uh, it is a letter that is either enlarged or shrunk, or backwards, or offset significantly. And the way the letter is rendered, uh, it actually like it influences the not just the meaning of the word, but the meaning of that passage too. And scribes can go in and like tell you like, hey, it normally would be this, but because it is in this way, that influences the word and the surrounding context of it. And I don't know the specifics behind um, Numbers 10, 35 through 36, um, and why it is considered its own. But I remember reading that a lot of the sages consider those 2 verses as containing its own book of wisdom. Um, but they read, and it came to be that wherever the ark set out, that Moshe said, "Rise up, O Yahweh, and let your enemies be scattered, and let those who hate you flee before you." Oh, there we go. Sorry. Did the audio cut out on it too, or just the video when I was reading that?
No, it was everything.
Okay. Well, I will start again. So, um, apparently, when I close out to try and fix my audio, um, that it makes it to where I have to tap the screen every minute, or the camera cuts out on me. Because we had this a few weeks ago where we were fighting audio, and then I had to X out, and I had to every minute tap the screen, otherwise it went dark on me. So
It's weird.
stand by while I struggle a little bit. It'll be worth it. Numbers 10, 35, and 36. And it came to be that whenever the ark set out, that Moshe said, "Rise up, O Yahweh, and let your enemies be scattered. Let those who hate you flee before you." And when it rested, he said, "Return, O Yahweh, to the countless thousands of Israel." That's Numbers 10, 35, and 36. And like I said, um, I'm not a super Torah scholar by any means, and I would have to go back and get a full explanation as to why the sages consider that to be its own separate book in Numbers, but I do remember reading that that those two verses are considered its own separate, and so everything before it would be one. Those two would be one, and then Numbers chapter 11 through the end of the book of Numbers would be its own set, uh, and that is a possible connection to wisdom is hewn out. Uh, it's 7 columns because it would be 7 books for the Torah, not 5. And I don't know that that's truly what's there, but generally basing wisdom off of the Torah, especially in Proverbs, is oftentimes connected. So I
Mhm.
thought that was a of note connection, even if it may not be a true one for one in that spot. Uh,
Well, I do remember hearing about that now.
mm,
Um, and it's interesting.
mm,
Um, but yeah, I don't know much more about that than what you just
yeah,
said. So.
and that's speculation. So we're not basing any real faith off of that, but I found it interesting. Uh, verse 2, she slaughtered her meat, she has mixed her wine, she's also prepared her table, she set out her young women, she cries out from the highest places of the city. I can understand the slaughtering of her meat. Um, I can understand um, prepping the table, getting her young women, which would be indicative of her, the people who would serve at her table. Um, I can understand crying from the highest places of the city. Um, the mixing of the wine, I don't necessarily make a connection on that, but I don't know if that is. Uh, I don't know if that's a just a cultural custom um, where it's like sweetening the wine, maybe, so that way it's more pleasant. But that's something that is a little bit beyond me. I don't know if you have any insight on that one. Or
Not
I'm not a wine
particularly.
connoisseur, so I don't know.
Um, I'm not sure about the wine thing,
Yeah.
to be honest. I don't know. I'm kind of seeing like as you read through the beginning of
Mhm.
this, I'm almost seeing. I don't know if I'm just taking it out of context, but I'm almost seeing this mental image of like the end times wedding feast or just a wedding feast in
Mhm.
general kind of thing, where they're like setting the table,
Mhm.
and then almost like when says that she cries out to the highest places of the city, who is simple, let
Mhm.
him turn in here. Um, and then as for him who lacks heart, she says to him, "Come and eat of my bread and drink of the wine I've mixed. Leave the
Mhm.
simple ones and live, and walk in the way of understanding." And I'm kind of thinking of the parable that Messiah gives of basically the wedding feast. That's what I remember at least. And the master of the house is like sending servants out to go gather
Mhm.
people. And I'm just getting a lot of that imagery as we
Yeah.
read this.
So
I don't know
that's
why.
a noteworthy connection. I don't know if that's rock solid either, um, but that sounds pretty valid in all honesty. Matt Baer, you make an interesting point. You said my wife suggests that people added water to make it less potent. Maybe applies, maybe not. Um, then Medic Mouse throws in, yeah, I think that they would water it down and probably mix different vessels based on fermentation, which speculation, of course. And I don't think that that's wrong. I know that it was a cultural custom to water down wine, and that was so. If water was semi questionable, they would mix it with wine. and the alcohol would kill whatever would be inside. Um, there there are ways to manufacture wine to where it's relatively strong in compared to like just what your normal table wine would be. Um, but wine's also uh, not really a beverage that is distilled. So that's you're only going to get wine so potent uh, before getting to its kind of max alcohol content. Um, I don't think that that's necessarily wrong. I do wonder. I've heard of spiced wine, and then I've also heard of sweet wine. I've heard of people mixing honey in it, but like I said, I'm not a wine connoisseur, so I don't know. Um, I Hoot, I do like your possible connection of the marriage supper of the lamb versus uh, what happens to all the wicked at the end, because we do have a compare and contrast uh, of people who are chasing wisdom, that it goes well for them, versus people
Hmm.
who are chasing foolishness, and it's like, ultimately this ends in destruction. Her guests are in the depths of Sheol. That's what the very end of 18 says. So,
Right.
uh, like that's I don't think that's a far cry from where we are.
Yeah.
Um, I do find it very interesting that wisdom is calling out from the highest places. So she's hoping uh, that her volume, she's hoping that the way she can project is going to reach the most amount of people. I don't know if you've ever tried to shout to somebody across a parking lot, but for some reason, when you stand on the edge of your car, like you open your door, and so the footboard, if you like stand up and get just a little bit higher, and cup your hands and shout for that helps carry your audio just a little bit more because
Hmm.
you're from a higher position. If you're out in the woods and you're trying to shout to one of your buddies, if you stand up on a rock for whatever reason and project your voice out a little bit more, than that just boosts your audio. I don't know if that allows the sound waves to get a little bit bigger because now you're from an elevated position or what, but for some reason higher works. Um, so that's what she's doing, is she's getting up to a higher place where she can project that audio a little bit more and be like, "Hey, I'm ready for you. Come this way. This is a lot better. You know, wisdom's better than foolishness. Come check it out. Think you'll have a good time."
Right. I don't know, man. Um, and then like the whole wisdom crying out thing, and
Hmm.
it's almost like when in Revelation 18 it says, "And I heard another voice from the heaven saying, 'Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues.'" Just like this voice crying out, from the heavens, um, trying to get people to continue down the straight and narrow path and get out of the way of destruction.
Hmm.
Which, by the end of this Proverb 9, her guests are in the depths of Sheol. I don't know. I'm just seeing a lot of
Yeah,
this imagery, and I'm not sure
yeah, a lot
why,
of the
but
parallel. No, I don't think you're necessarily wrong. Again, I think there's some solid enough basis for a good connection in there. Uh, so yeah, 6 through 12. Um, leave the simple, leave the simple ones and live. Walk in the way of understanding. He who reproves a scoffer gets shame for himself, and he who rebukes a wrong gets himself a blemish. Do not reprove a scoffer, lest he hate you. Reprove a wise one, and he loves you. Give instruction to a wise one, and he is wiser still. teach a righteous one, and he increases in learning. The fear of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom. The knowledge of the set apart one is understanding. For by me your days become many, and years of life added to you. If you become wise, you have become wise for yourself. And if you have scoffed, you alone bear it. So the compare and contrast between being able to rebuke someone who's wise versus not being able to rebuke someone who is, the word they use here is a scoffer, but someone who's going to listen to the rebuke versus someone who isn't. And I see that compare and contrast several places in Proverbs. As if you listen to a rebuke, you're wise, versus if you don't, then you're not. It's almost like he's, hello, McFly, hello, trying to drive that point home for a reason. The fact that if we listen to the rebukes that are provided, that are biblically based, that are like, hey, you need to change your ways, they're for our good. They may hurt, they may not be wonderful in the moment, but they bring life. I can be seriously thankful to some brothers in my life who saw that I was going one way when I was 18 and a hothead and just not about the preservation of life and myself at all. And they're like, hey, you've got to change, otherwise this does not end well. And I quite literally got a very rough attitude adjustment.
Yeah, and I think we all at one point, when we're in that bit of a lost state, get that blessing from somebody. And I don't know. I think there's always that point where the Spirit just really moves you for whatever reason. And even though you don't maybe at the time understand what that is, and it starts to move your heart, and the first time you start to receive it, just like something changes. And I think the Spirit moving inside of you and having that presence of the Father is really what starts to make that connection. Because otherwise you're full of yourself. You're trying to be wise for yourself. Not like referring back to this particular part of that verse, but you're seeking for your own wisdom. You're not seeking true wisdom. And so a lot of times somebody that has that wisdom goes a long way. You become a scoffer where you kind of reject it. You don't want to hear it because you think you have your own path worked out. And then, one day, for whatever reason, it just changes. The Father's like, all right, well, how's that working out for you? And then you start to receive it and you think back to it. And because I remember us talking about that particular thing that changed for you. And, I think everybody ends up having that moment where something just kind of offsets your course of action and you have to choose a different path. So
Just thinking in the rebuke versus don't rebuke, because it tells us don't rebuke a scoffer. Leviticus 18. Do not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the children of your people, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahweh. So that you will love your neighbor as yourself, or you shall love your neighbor as yourself. That gets quoted a lot. The verse right before that in Leviticus 19:17. Do not hate your brother in your heart. Reprove your neighbor for certain. and bear no sin because of him. So we're supposed to reprove a brother. And I find that interesting that that's right before love your neighbor as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
What's of note is in that section, I'm just going to jump back. So verse 11 in Leviticus 19. Do not steal, do not lie, do not deceive one another, do not swear falsely by my names, and so profane the name of your Elohim. I am Yahweh. Do not oppress your neighbor or rob him. The wages of him who is hired is not to remain with you all night until morning. Do not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block before the blind, but fear your Elohim. I am Yahweh. Do no unrighteousness in right ruling. Do not be partial to the poor or favor the face of the great, by rightly rule, but rightly rule your neighbor in righteousness. Do not go slandering among your people. Do not stand against the blood of your neighbor, for I am Yahweh. Do not hate your brother in your heart. Reprove your neighbor for certain, and bear no sin because of him. Do not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the children of your people, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahweh. Guard my laws, and do not let your livestock mate with one another. Do not let your livestock mate with another kind. Sorry. Do not sow your field with mixed seed. Do not put a garment woven of two sorts of thread, which in that case would be wool and linen, upon you. And man, it just goes down from there. But I find it fascinating that the verse right before that gets thrown around all the time. Okay, there we go. I should be back now. I find it fascinating that the verse that's right before the love your neighbor as yourself is do not hate your brother in your heart, reprove your neighbor for certain, and bear no sin because of him. I find that very interesting that those two verses run right next to each other. That we are supposed to reprove a brother, and it says bear no sin because of him. It says bear no sin because of him. The interesting thing that what happens if I don't reprove my brother? Is it sin for me to let my brother go on sinning if I see it and I do nothing about it? I don't know.
Sorry, I'm like way off into space over here.
You're good.
I'm sure in some capacity you are, and something's rattling around in there. In the sense that, I mean, we are our brother's keeper, and I think there's supportive evidence for that throughout the word. I just lost where we were at.
You're good. I was in Leviticus 19, but I'm done with making that point. But if you want to camp out there, we can.
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, dude. Still like
You're
trying
good.
to stay awake over here.
Coming out of that really, really heavy sleep, I feel your pain. If you want to sleep less, have kids. I promise. Diving in on your comparison to end times. Were you thinking of Yeshua's description in Matthew, or were you thinking more Revelation?
Mostly his description in Matthew, given
Okay.
some of the different parables too. Um, but just some floating ideas at this point.
Yeah, because I know we were in Matthew 25 a little bit last week, and uh, there's a decent comparison, um, really all throughout those parables in what is it 20. There's some in 21. There's some in 22.
Some in 20.
Yeah, there is some in 20. And then 24, 25. And it's interesting because a lot of those have comparisons with wicked people and righteous people. And we have this juxtaposition, I guess, between wisdom and foolishness in 9 on the proverb that we're camping out in. And especially, I think you're definitely onto something. Verse 18, he does not know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of Sheol. So I don't think you're wrong on this. Was there a specific parable that Yeshua was teaching that sticks in your mind, or are you just kind of thinking of several of them?
So I'm probably thinking more on the lines of specifically Matthew 22 and this parable of this king who made a wedding feast for his son, sent out his
Mm-hmm.
servants to call those who were invited to the wedding feast, but they would not come. I'm just going on from there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for many are called, but few are chosen.
Mm-hmm.
Just where is
Yeah,
it?
so that would be the beginning of 22 through 14. You want me to read it?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. And Yeshua responded and spoke to them again by parables and said, "The reign of the heavens is like a man, a sovereign, who made a wedding feast for his son, and set out his servants to call those who were invited to the feast, but they would not come. Again, he set out servants, saying, 'Say to those who are invited, see, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and fatted cattle are slaughtered, and all and all is ready. Come to the wedding feast.' But they disregarded it and went their way. This one to his field, and that one to his trade, and the rest, having seized his servants, insulted and killed them. But when the sovereign heard, he was wroth and sent out his soldiers, destroyed those murderers, and set their city on fire. Then he said to his servants, 'The wedding feast indeed is ready, but those who were invited are not worthy. Therefore, go into the street corners, and as many as you find, invite them to the wedding feast.' And those servants went out into the street corners and gathered all whom they found, both wicked and good. And the wedding hall was filled with guests. And when the sovereign came to view the guests, he saw there a man who had not put on a wedding garment. And he said to him, 'Friend, how did you come in here not having a wedding garment?' And he was speechless. Then the sovereign said to the servants, Bind him hand and foot and take him away, throw him out into the utter darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called, but few are chosen. I find it interesting in that parable that uh, all the king's friends are essentially turning down his invite. And I know when Yeshua is giving this parable that he's making um, the connection of how many of his own people are rejecting him, uh, and that there are there are people who are outside of the cool kids club uh, for lack of a better description that the Pharisees may have given themselves. Uh, that there's people outside of that group who are actually going to be at the wedding feast, but um, not all of the original group of people are going to be there. Because yeah, if you were throwing a big party, or if you were inviting people to your wedding and all of your friends told you no, um, either you got some bad friends or uh, you're inviting the wrong people, one of the two.
Mm.
And so he goes out and he invites a whole bunch of other people who weren't originally invited. And there's connection there in the fact that Yahweh opened up his everything to where he's going to bring in everybody and not just the original chosen people, which was the plan from the beginning to bring everybody in, but he was going to use his chosen people to bring in more. Uh, but if we've lost our way, is he not going to uh, eventually just cut us off? I mean, he's going to give us chances to come back, but where does that grace end? Eventually, it's going to. If I'm just glad I'm not the one who decides that.
True. And this is what I'm about to say next. It's kind of a random thought, kind of an out
Mm-hmm.
there thought, because it's not exactly what's being explained here.
Mm-hmm.
But something that I also kind of think of reading through that parable is I don't know why. Because like I said, it's not necessarily what it's talking about.
Yeah.
But kind of sometimes brings me thoughts of how it seems sometimes for several people that kind of walk in this understanding that we have, or like I'm starting to see it a little bit myself, but how many of us eventually feel, and not all of us, but kind of feel this gravitational pull away from where you're at, like your original guests, if you will, whether this be family or friends that you grew up around, and like just leaving where you are
Mm-hmm.
and being called to a different feast kind of thing, where it's like, because like for me right now, I still love a lot of the people I'm around, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing my best to bear witness to Yeshua
Mm-hmm.
and walk alongside him. But a lot of the time, given that most of the people don't have the same convictions that I do, it
Mm-hmm.
becomes very contentious at times. It gets harder. And then another verse that comes to mind is the prophet's not revered in his own hometown, kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And so, like, how many of us in this walk kind of have felt called away from the current people we're at? They're not
Mm-hmm.
receiving this wedding feast, if you will, and so
Yeah.
you kind of like, it's not a one for one kind of deal, but it's just
Mm-hmm.
this idea of like, well, there was this group of people in mind where I was like, okay, we're gonna do life together forever.
Mm-hmm.
But then
Yeah.
eventually, you almost feel whether convicted or shoved
Mm-hmm.
in a box, depending on your purview, where you have to seek fellowship with other people, or like there's just this changing of the guests kind of thing. And I don't know, like I said, really random out there thought, but that's like something else that kind of comes to mind is sometimes you don't end up with the same people that you started with, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
And to that point, I think that there is a certain time frame that he calls us to go do a job, uh, and you will be in that, um, and that time frame may be a lifetime. That time frame may just be for uh, you know a few years or a few months or somewhere in between. And something that um, pretty good brother pointed out to me was that, um, hey, remember that not everybody is gonna see something all the way out to its full conclusion. Um, that one person sows, one person waters, one person weeds, um, and that you may just be there to plant some seeds. You may have just been there to water a few seeds, and that you probably won't see this side of heaven. You probably won't see uh, it to its full conclusion all the way. But another aspect of that we don't often think about is what do those seeds need to grow? They need light. And yes, we're supposed to be the light. We're supposed to bring light. But what's the ultimate source of light? Um, and are we hovering over them so much that the sunlight can't actually shine on them?
mm,
And maybe we need to get out of the way so that way they can actually be truly exposed to the light. Not that we're not bringing that light with us, but if you're standing over your garden, casting a shadow on it, and you're shining your flashlight on it, your flashlight's eventually going to run out of battery. But the sun over your head beating down would be a better source of light if you would just step over to the side. At a certain point, we're getting in our own way.
mhm,
Um, and it's not that we failed, it's not that um, we're doing a bad job or whatever, but sometimes he moves us out of the place that he called us to, because the job's done, and us being there any longer is just casting a shadow on the very seed that he wants to grow. Uh, so I think that was a very wise assessment by that brother. Um, Commenting real quick in the comments, Bertrand, I would agree with your assessment on the gleaners. Uh, that I think today people who would be cleaners don't even know about the practice. If you want them to have the food from your field, then donate it directly, or put it out on a stand and put free essentially on that sign. There's a lot of food banks that you can take your produce to, uh, and yeah, the idea of not harvesting your field all the way to the end. We were briefly touching on that in Leviticus 19. Um, and Bertrand throughout who there's all new people every 100 years. This is our crew on earth. We got to do our best with the people that we have. Um, I would reiterate on that, that while you are where you are, whether it's for 5 more minutes, or 50 more years, wherever he's called you, we need to be diligent in that calling up into the very second that he removes us from it. Um, think about in high school, uh, the last probably 3 months of senior year, nobody cares. Like, yeah, you're seeing all your friends and stuff, but like actual academics, your last like 3 months in high school, it's like, man, I've already got my plans set for when I get out of here, whether that's college, military, work, whatever. Like, I, very very few people um, are like, well, I might go to college. I might not go to college. I might look for a job. I might not look for a job. It's most people have pretty well, like, maybe not the specifics, but like the big direction of what you're going to do after high school. Most people have got most of that figured out within the last few months of high school, and um, maybe not the fine points of the plan, but the big strokes for sure. So that way they have at least some direction. And then it's like, man, these grades don't matter no more, essentially, because like you've already got the big pieces of the chessboard already moved. Um, and so like everybody except for the person who's trying to graduate top of their class pretty well slacks off. Um, I would I would advise against that attitude in wherever he has placed you. Um, if you're moving in 3 days, he still has you where you are for 3 days. If you're where you are for 30 more years, he still has you where you are for that allotted time. Uh, that is still ample time to share the gospel where you are. And I'm not saying you're slacking off. I would just
Right.
impart that on you that wherever he's got you for however long, you're still called to that job until he calls you away.
Yep. No. And both from you and Veritron, that's a good word. I wasn't. I'm tired, so hopefully I didn't like make it come off that way.
You're good. You're good. I
But
don't I
it
don't
was it
think
was
you're
more just
slacking.
like the idea, the thought in the
Mhm.
back of my head.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, those are wise words.
I don't think that you're checking out until wherever he calls you away. Uh, but just wanted to
Mm-hmm.
pass that along.
Well, received. Thank you.
Oh man. Um, I'm gonna cut this short. I can hear my kids in the background, and so I'm gonna go be a good dad.
Heck yeah, man. Nothing
Uh,
wrong with that. So,
do you want to close this out, or do you want me to?
um, I'll let you do it since I kind of opened up in Proverbs. So,
Okay, that's cool. Father Yah, we praise your name. Thank you for who you are and what you do. Thank you for not giving up on us when we have we have shown just so much that is not deserving of second chances, when we have um, run away from you. Thank you for not giving up on us. Help us to not give up on the people that you have called us to be a light to. Help us to remember that your timing is far better than ours. We thank you for Yeshua. We thank you for his death, his burial, his resurrection. We thank you that he has provided a way home for us. Help us to love those that you have called us to serve. Help us to love our neighbors. Help us to reprove our brothers. Help us to receive rebukes and heed them. Thank you for surrounding us with people who love us. Help us to recognize that you have given us far more than we deserve. Thank you for the second chances. Help us to give second chances to those around us. Convict us to open your word and read it and do what it says. Thank you for giving us the Ruach HaKodesh. Thank you for filling us with your Holy Spirit. Thank you for giving us another day to bring glory to you. Amen.
oh,
Oh, take your Bible with you. Go do hard things.
absolutely. Love all you guys.
Love you guys. Shalom.
Shalom.